My biggest fear as a parent is that I'm going to raise spoiled, entitled, and rotten kids. And that's a conundrum for me and many of our subscribers who came from modest backgrounds and worked their butts off to provide their kids with tons of opportunity. Now that we're here as parents, we know that we've given them a great life, but they will never have the struggle that we faced. Today I talk with my friend Wil Reynolds, the founder of Seer Interactive, about the challenges of modern day parenting for successful parents. You'll learn how to model generosity, rules around how much the kids should inherit, and why if you want to expose your kids to other types of living, travel is not the way to do it. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Examined Life podcast, where we deconstruct some of life's thorniest questions so that you can live a more productive, examined, and joyful life. Today's question is, are we overthinking parenting? And I'm joined by a friend, a thinker, an entrepreneur, a fellow dad, just an amazing human being whose energy is just going to jolt you when you hear him talk, Mr. Wil Reynolds. How's it going, man?
Dude, it's great. Just picked up my kids.
Yeah.
Then I go to the airport in 2 hours. You make it all work, right?
I love it. I love it. So I want to set the frame on why we're having this conversation. And before we even get into your background, we were talking the other day and you said, I'd love to get on the podcast and talk about parenting because I think that there's a gap. There's not enough good advice or good content out there. I'm paraphrasing. Say more about that. What's missing in the parenting content?
Honesty. Seriously, like when's the last time you heard somebody be like, I don't know if having this kid was a great idea, said by nobody, right? But then you get really real people who really are introspective. And once in a while, you'll find somebody that was like, yo, well, obviously I'm making the best out of it. But if I had to go back, 15 years or 20 years, I gave up a lot to have that second, third or whatever. But like, that's what I think is missing is just like honest dialogue around the pitfalls and the awesome parts we all talk about, but there's pitfalls to it as well.
Yeah. And a lot of the quiet trade-offs. I think people know of like the loud trade-offs, but there's a lot of quiet kind of micro trade-offs that we're always making. So
tons. Like my business isn't growing as much as it could because I got kids. Like where's that ever talked about? Like that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? My business, there's a lot of things I say no to that I could fly to. I could go see a client. I could go to this conference and try to get new business. My business is smaller because I've got kids, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of those quiet trade-offs that I literally have never heard in any documentation, any blog post, any presentations, anywhere.
I love that. So before we jump into the question, first I'm going to tell our listeners, we love debating these questions in our community. So if you want to join one of our upcoming group coaching cohorts, check out radreads.co/coaching to get your examined life on. And I'm going to briefly introduce you, Wil, because I was actually attracted to your work on a 2-part essay I believe you wrote on I have enough or I have enough money, which is a question that is very big in our community, which funny enough, we're not going to directly talk about like what's enough money. But I'll give the TLDR and then I'll let you introduce yourself. You're the founder, 100% owner, head of innovation at Seer Interactive, which is an SEM agency. Is that
good social,
SEO,
all that stuff.
Social agency. One of the attractive things about your writing and why I want to have this conversation is that you have enough. You have had a successful career. I don't think you've raised VC money. You can do whatever you want with your money. You have all your needs are met. And so it adds a layer of conversation because what you have is very aspirational to many people listening. And it also, you have perspective from quote unquote the other side, right?
Yep.
And and I think that that's always helpful. And because you don't mince words and you don't sugarcoat anything, it will be, I would love it's going to come up throughout the conversation. What does the other side look like of not caring about money? And my words, not yours. So, but tell like you're at an event. You do a lot of work in the Philadelphia community, and people are like, oh, Wil, how do you spend your time? How do you answer that question?
Oh, geez. Well, I guess, I don't know. We should probably, I think this concept of having enough is really grounds a lot of other decisions.
Okay, let's do it.
So I'm trying to find a way to take notes while you're talking
Yeah.
on my phone. I don't have a pen around here. The way I got to enough ain't like it's in many ways it's not pretty, right?
Uh,
And I think that people are like, it's like most people I don't think would want to take the journey that
uh,
I took because we get trapped by the things, right? So let me tell
mm,
you what I mean by that. So I bought a house uh, when I shortly after the business kind of started being stable, and that house was like 400 and like 30 grand. So
Okay.
no like crazy thing. Um, at least
How many
in
years ago, like
Philadelphia,
roughly?
15, 16 years
15 years.
ago.
Okay.
And it was like right next to I-95, and it was builder's grade. Like everything was pretty low quality. So therefore, like my entire 15 years living there, like cars were whizzing by. You could hear all the loud trucks. It wasn't like it was in a bad part of like the neighborhood because who wants to live under 95, right? So then you got
uh,
homeless people outside and all that stuff, right? I moved in when the company did 1 million. The year we did 30 million, I still lived there. So when
uh,
people are like, "Well, how did you end up with enough?" You're like, "Well, in part because I didn't buy into the like, well, I should level up." Right?
uh,
Like most of the cars I bought were used.
uh,
So like I was able to shun some of those things, which then made it faster for me to get to my enough point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And was enough a specific amount, like X million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever, or is it more of like a feeling?
It's a feeling.
It's a
It's
feeling.
when you go through the process. So for me, it was like when I had a chance to sell the business and somebody
uh,
said that's life-changing money, I actually decided to internalize that and be
uh,
like, how would my life actually change?
uh,
Like, so if this big check drops into my account someday,
Yeah.
I had to process. It took me like a good like 4 or 5 months of being like, how would my life actually change? And I kept
uh,
looking for things. Would I do
uh,
this? No. Would I do that? Mm-mm. Would I
uh,
do that? No. And I just kept being like, oh shit, I got enough. That's how it all came together. And my
Yeah.
nanny had to have it on her arm for me to even think of it mentally. And then I saw her with that from the time she started with us. And then as the company grew, I was able to realize like, yeah, I wouldn't do much different than I'm doing
uh,
now.
And
So
did you think it's because you said the nanny, she has a tattoo. What is it? I have enough
it,
or
it
what?
says enough on her arm
Enough
as well.
on her
Yeah,
arm.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. Is it because you have simple desires? Like you don't want to buy tons of shit and you don't like, you said cars. So what do people want to buy? They want to buy nice houses, cars, like clothing, things like that, experiences. I mean, you
The-
travel well.
I do, but I make other people pay for it, you know? So, um, if I speak at a conference or something, I'm
uh,
like, oh, well, fly me first class, right? Which means I get all kinds of extra points. So then when I go to take my family somewhere, like I won't ask to be paid to speak. I like helping people, right? So it's not like I need to be paid to speak. I like trying to help people. But, I'll take payment in the form of like a donation, or I'll
Okay.
be like, donate it to one of the charities I work with, or I'll be like, hey, just fly me in like first class or something, which could cost a lot, especially for my international flights. But then I get so many points that when I want to bring my wife and kids along, I got enough points to let them fly for free. So that's how I've kind of managed the experiences piece. And I will splurge on great hotels because
Yeah.
I love going somewhere where people really care about me enjoying my time there and
Yep.
not just me posting my head up. So that's the one place where I'll spend a bit, but the same places that I would book, like on me and my wife's honeymoon, which was like 15 years ago, are the same caliber of places that we book today. And I haven't really leveled those up. I might just go a
Got
little
it.
bit more frequently.
And are you not leveling it up? Because you don't desire it, or is there another story around not like, I don't want to be the person that spends X at a hotel, or I don't want to get used to having this level of luxury.
So I'm already living that, right? When
Yeah.
it comes to hotels, I'm already living it.
Yeah.
I will not fly private
Yeah.
because one, my wife was like, we're gonna have those kids. I was like, nope, don't want to do that. But then also I was like, ooh, I could see that being the kind of thing that I could get used to. And that's not even used to, because I wouldn't do it that often because it's freaking expensive.
Yes. The
But to do
delta
it
is
even
huge.
once or twice, you'd be like, oh man, now when I get in the first class or whatever when I'm upgraded. I won't pay for first class.
Yeah.
Like I will get the status that'll get me high
Boom.
likely to be upgraded, but I won't pay for it, right? So I
Yeah.
think that the flying private is the only thing that sounds cool to me, but I would be like, I don't think I want to do that because I think it's hard to go back the other
Okay.
way. But everything else, no, it's just like, what more do I want?
Yeah.
What,
Yeah. I love that. Tell us, we're going to talk about parenting. Tell us two questions. What was the greatest gift your parents gave you? And
oh,
if you could change one thing about the way they parented you, and if you want to think, I had some time to think about this. I can go first.
yeah, no, that's deep. Go ahead.
Okay. So the greatest gift that my dad had this saying, and he said, "We may not be the smartest, but we're the hardest working." So very kind of Cambodian first generation immigrant, came to the United States. The listeners have heard the story. $500, no family. Cambodian genocide is about to begin in Cambodia, and but not
No,
like he had a
yeah,
job, so it wasn't like starting from zero. He had a job at the United Nations where she ended up working his whole career. So we may not be the smartest, but we're the hardest working. And it just taught me that one statement
hmm,
teaches you work ethic. I think the shadow side of that statement is I look at like mostly my Caucasian wealthy friends, and their dads would be like, you could be everything you want. Like my dad doesn't actually believe that. My best friend was a, tall, handsome white guy. And his dad would tell him that, and he would just like go into any room with like 120% confidence. And I would go into any room with 80% confidence, but I knew that I could make up that difference through sheer willpower and hard work. So I think it's a gift, but also it has a shadow to it. But I still view that as the gift. In terms of what I wish they had changed, I forget even how I framed the question. What I wish they had done differently. I think it's closely related, but I think that they fundamentally believe that for something to be good, you have to have suffered for it. There
say
was kind of
more.
this like, it's just like like if you enjoy like if you didn't have to struggle through writing, then the writing's probably not that good. Like if you had to struggle, like everything that has a good output needs to have a struggle. And I do believe that many, maybe most good things need some element of struggle. But I think that they had this view that like it was it was conditional, meaning that you couldn't have a great thing without a struggle. So I think of like, I don't know, like there are definitely things that I can surrender into to use like okay, like let's take love. I think that love, there's struggle in like in the sense that like relationships are challenging, but I don't need to like grind every day just for my love for my wife to feel worthy, right? I think that
Mm,
there is this like love can be love, like and there can be a simple, effortless love that maybe comes from like investing in it or the hard work that you put into it. But I think that the message was just like I give you a very specific example. My mom loves like these like well, she aspires to have these expensive face creams, like anti-aging creams. And
uh-huh.
so for Mother's Day, I'll buy her like $150 anti-aging cream. She would never, ever, ever. So what she does is she takes the anti-aging cream, and it's like Kiehl's or something. And your Kiehl has like the automatic 20%, like literally they send you 20% off coupons every single day. And
Mhm.
so she'll go, even though it's on my credit card and I paid, she'll go to Kiehl's and return it, get a 20% credit for me, not even for her, just so that she can enjoy it. Like she can enjoy the
Oh,
gift because there's like it was just too
right.
easy, right?
Wow. Wow. Wow, there's something there, man.
Yeah. So you can imagine, I don't even fully appreciate how you internalize the downstream effect of that. But I think it makes you question everything that's good. Is like, well, was there enough struggle that like came with this, or was there enough, so those would be my two.
Oh my gosh, yeah, man. Ooh, man, that's deep though, bro. Dang, that's deep. All right, so I think everything for me revolves around my mom. My parents are still together, so it's nothing like that. But my mom really didn't allow race to be an excuse, and for however I ended up. It was never allowed to be a reason. And I think that when your parents drill into your head that you're just going to have to work harder than other people to get the same opportunity, and that's said to you over and over and over again, you internalize that, and then you literally are like, well, then I just have to work harder than you. It's like a similar kind of thing that you were saying. And I think it's a gift,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like I think that people underestimate the value. So let's say this.
Mm.
It's easy to say being an underrepresented person makes it harder for me to do certain things, right? I don't get access to certain things, right?
No.
What nobody says is if you end up with a mom like mine and many of my other friends, your parents drill into your head that you're never going to get a fucking fair shot. So you got to be so much better than other people because if the world ever becomes fair, you're going to beat them either fucking way. Right? I can hope for the world to get better, but I'm not going to wait for it.
Yeah.
And like, so as a result, as the world has gotten better with some of these things, it's been even easier for me because I've already kind of, and I'll tell you like a story
a
of
cheat
how
code,
that,
so to speak.
of how that man, but nobody talks about the upside of being an underrepresented minority and having your parents tell you, I'm going to call Rio. I'll come back down in a little bit. Okay. You can watch a show. Yep. There we go. That's it. Right, man.
Yeah.
I
was going to edit that out, but since we're talking about parenting, we're leaving that in.
Leave that shit in, man. That's the real shit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But so to have my mother drill that into my head, it's like I've never heard somebody say having your parents drill that into your head is a positive. If this world was equal, truly equal, my mother would have never had to tell me those things. And if my mother never had to tell me that thing, maybe I wouldn't work as fucking hard. And maybe in a world where eventually things do get more equal, maybe, and people be like, oh, it's getting worse. I'm like, no, you're just watching more of the shit. Like you couldn't pay me as a black man to be born one day earlier than I was born in this freaking country.
No.
You could not pay me to be born one day earlier, right? Because my wife is white. I can marry who I want. I can go most places where I want. Like I've been through the South. I've been through Selma, Alabama with my white wife. We've walked over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, like, what you want me to, you think it's bad? Like what, would I have been 10 years earlier? No, thank you. Right. So I think there's real value in that. There's a flip side, which isn't, and it still hinges on my mom. When you watch a parent sacrifice, in some ways, parts of their happiness for you, you carry, or I'm saying you, but this is my story. This is for me. I realized a while back that I carry this consistent desire to make sure my mom knows that her sacrifices were worth it. Her putting up with certain things that her and my dad went through at a certain point where he was, struggling, that's worth it. So even to this day, it's so important for me to make my mom proud. Because if she made all the sacrifices she made to put me on the path that I'm on, and I did not make her outsized proud of that investment, then she's like, man, I gave up a lot of happiness for a lot of years to keep my family together. And this is what I got. Right. So
do you think she thinks that, or are you thinking that?
I'm never going to let her think it. It's up to me. I have the ability to put her in a position where she's never got to question that. And I will never have her have to question that for me.
But do you think that part of it, do you think that she would, I was going to say, like, she probably Because one part is like, she's probably been proud of you every moment, but then you would say that's because I've never let her think that.
Never let her think otherwise.
But do you think that if you didn't, like, because do you think that that's like even the frame of reference she uses for pride in her son?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't ask because I think it's too deep of a question for her to contemplate. But I don't want to put her in that position.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
let's just leave no doubt.
Yeah.
Right? Leave no doubt. And I feel now that I've left no doubt, because now part of enough is, if my company went from a $30 million company to a $100 million company, would my mom be more proud? No.
Yeah.
There was a threshold at which it was like, it could have been 1 million, right? It could have been 10. I don't know what it was. But now I'm at the point where I'm like, she's no more proud of me. I was recently at a conference with some pretty heavy hitters, and some pretty big people were in the room. And I told her some of the people that I met and the people that sat in on my session. She's like, oh my God, like I see those people before, right? And whatnot. And I was like, yeah, Mom. She was the first person I called when I closed a deal from a client's name that she would recognize.
Oh,
Because all
yeah.
before it was these little fucking barbershops, hair salons, and pizza shops. She had never heard of these fucking people, you know? And I think so somebody said this, oh my God, I wish I could find this. There was a Black dude on LinkedIn, and he posted something that was like, our parents oftentimes struggled so hard to put us in a position to be able to get into colleges and things like that, that when it comes time to like work at a startup versus like Microsoft, they're like, what are you doing? Right. And I think some of that exists in a lot of like first gen and whatnot. It's like, wait, like what's a company I heard of that I can either one, tell my friends, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Or two, just as like secure. Like, what do you mean you work at Seer Interactive? Like, I didn't sacrifice all that shit for you.
Yep.
For you to go and do that. Like, how are you going to cover your health insurance? Right? Like, how are you going to take care of the family that might need you to take care? We lift each other up. So yeah, I know it's a long-winded answer, but like those are the things that are just like kind of hitting in my head. You ask these deep questions and you got to process them, you know?
I love it. Well, what do you, on that point, what do you think my parents thought when I walked away from a $2 million job to become a blogger, right? At 35 with a 1-year-old.
Dude, respect
and a wife
to you
who's
for
an
being
artist.
able to do that. Respect. Because you're right. Like, you strike me as somebody who thinks deeply, and like, you know, you want your parents immigrants. Like, you want them to be proud. And like, I have tied up my business in many ways with what makes my mom proud. But then I also, to be honest, I also make sure that I spend time with my mom.
Yeah.
And that, because it's not, at some point, it's not the business anymore. It's time with the grandkids. And she's like really proud to see how much time I spend with my kids, because my dad sacrificed spending time. He didn't sacrifice. I don't think he really wanted to, but he also had to work 3 jobs to be able to send me to these private schools and whatnot.
Yeah.
And put me in that position. And I think that's one of the things I love about the position that I'm in, is I will never not spend time with my kids and blame work. I can't. I'm good. Right. So it's all on me. Right. I can never, ever say, oh, I didn't spend time with my kids because somebody made me travel, or somebody did this, or my job, I didn't get that promotion. So now I'm trying to work to get the promotion so I get the money to take care of the kids. It's like, no. None of that is true for me. That's the other beauty of me being at the enough point, is when I don't spend time with my kids. So I'm about to leave on a flight. And I will not spend time with my kids tonight, and I will probably miss them for dinner tomorrow, which this past month, the last couple of weeks have been brutal. I have to just own that there are other parts of me that fill me up that aren't just being a dad.
Yeah. Ooh.
And I might be a worse dad if I'm not filling up those other buckets.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're going to come back to that, but I want to talk about that point that you just made about the parents, like parents using the excuse. You said your dad had to work 3 jobs so that you could go to these schools. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who lives very well in the suburbs here, and he got the highest status on the airlines in the 3rd month of the year.
Jesus God.
And he has so the kind of things like, even my daughter, my 9-year-old jokes, she's like, oh, he flew to New York for a 45-minute meeting. I'm like, yeah, you know, people do that. So one of those. And so I know a lot of people, and I'm sure, or I wonder if you see this in your peer group of, you know, successful people, is that they create this self-justifying narrative, which is like, well, I need to fly all the time to be partner so that I can give my kids opportunity. And I feel like there's this like this internal sleight of hand, which is like, no, 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 no. And I do this often too. It's like,
We all
no,
do.
it's your like you like the praise of getting on stage. You like the possibility of an even bigger bonus. But how much of it, like, how do you gut check yourself when there is that I want to, well, you've cleared the enough point. So nothing beyond, nothing, no dollar matters to the family at this point. But even as you were kind of crescendoing towards that enough point, how did you call bullshit on yourself? Because you're a driven person. You probably have, and you want to win. You're competitive. You know, all check, check, check. Will's giving a thumbs up to every one of those.
Yes.
How
to
are you
all
able
the
to call,
things.
or how do you tell her, you know, because I think a lot of people are struggling. Like, how do I call bullshit on myself when I say family, but like my actions don't reflect my, you know, my true values?
We have to question it. You just have to question it.
Yeah.
What am I optimizing for? Right. So for me, real talk, I can share the image of it with you is my wife went away to the UK for something just before we had kids. It was as soon as we moved into our old house. And I painted a chalkboard wall in the house and I wrote like all these things that like were my checks to myself and they were sitting outside of my bedroom. So every time it was like, called mom. Have I worked out? Have I read a book? Have I thanked a client? Then it was like hit 2 million in sales. And then we lived there so long, I just kept putting lines through it. And I'd be like, how about 5? And how about 10? And after 10, I just stopped putting lines through it. But I put all these things up to remind me of things that mattered to me.
Yeah.
And whenever I was like, oh, what are you optimizing for? Or when's the last time you called your mom? If I can't remember when's the last time you read a book? I can't remember the last time. But if you don't find some way to document those things that you say you care about.
Yeah.
And then to place, the harder part I think is, then you got to place how much of that fills my bucket. Because when I said, I got enough, people are like, well, you could retire and you could spend more time volunteering. I'm like, I volunteer enough. I've done that internal work to be like, that bucket is full. If that bucket overflows and this bucket's empty, that's not good for my balance. Right.
Yeah.
So I think you have to try to find some way to document what you actually freaking care about outside of just the work. And for me, I had to put in hard lines. So this past month was the first month in like 8 years that I traveled more than 5 days in a month without my family.
Okay. In 8 years.
In 8 years, because my wife and I were on a trip. You have to know what you're addicted to.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to winning. I'm competitive. I'll hit the road. I'll do all those things. So then once you realize that, and also you gotta be into it, what drives your ego, right? So when people ask me to speak at these conferences and fly here, fly there, like that's ego. I also love teaching. So I feel like, it's a way to teach people. I love helping people, right? But then I also realize that if I'm being asked to do more and more of that, then someday I could wake up and be like, I was gone half the month. So on a cross-country drive once with my wife, we were driving from San Francisco to Salt Lake, it's about 12 hours. I said, how many days in a month could I be gone without the family traveling with me? And she's like, I don't want to answer that question. She's like, I love the fact that you love your job, like whatever. And I was like, then I'm not talking to you. And it was a 12-hour drive, 12-hour
Classic
leg
wife
that day.
answer. I'm not answering that.
Right. And I was like, no, I need those guardrails. So I think the first time you start to realize something's a little bit off, you might want to ask yourself, what guardrails can I put in place to make sure that it's a checkpoint? So my wife was like, I never want you to stop doing something. But what it gave me is people were like, oh, Will, there's this conference in Malaysia. Do you want to go? And I would look at my calendar and be like, do I want to exceed my days for this?
I love that.
No, and I did that for 8 freaking years, 12 months a year. And last month, this October, was the first time I went over 5 days in a month traveling without the family.
Wow. What caused it? What tripped it?
Fucking business sucks, man. Like, I think it's one of the things, it's another thing we don't want to admit, right?
Yeah.
We like this up and down stuff. Like I grew every year for 20 years in a row, double digits. I don't know what it's like to have down years or down months. And I had a down year last year. And then this year we saw coming in at the end of the year, I'm like, what is happening? We're not closing deals the way we used to. A lot of verbals that were like crumbling at the finish line. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to strap on the backpack, hit the road, and make sure I'm like securing my relationships, our contracts, going to some conferences where I can create opportunity for the business. And the cool part is I'm not doing that for me and my family. I'm not confused
Yeah.
about that.
I
I'm
was
doing
gonna
that for
ask you that. Yeah.
I'm doing that for, I want to grow the business because the more we grow, the more I can take care of other people's families and whatnot.
Yeah.
I
That's
know
cute.
certain things for me are like a rounding error if we have
Yeah.
enough profit. So I want to get back to growth so that I can take care of other people's families, not my own.
I love I love that. Oh man, beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, the guardrails, I don't
I
have to travel for it, but I use them like they're very time based. So it's very simple. It's like I want to have dinner with my kids and put them to bed, and so that means I have to stop working at about 5:30. I want to be present with them for breakfast, and I want to work out. That means I don't start working until 9:30. I usually want to do some kind of like spiritual meditation or something in the middle of the day. So I basically, it's my coach, one of my coaches, he's like, you're squeezing the work out of the day by adding things like kind of like your list outside of the wall. But for me, it's like on this day, I want to make sure I do X, Y, Z and work, but I'm not going to I will not stay up late to work like that. I've passed that point in my life. I will never sacrifice sleep for work.
Yeah.
I've passed that point in my
Dude,
life.
your stories are
Um,
tough. You got some
so,
stories, bro.
but okay, so let's go back. We've set the stage for 31 minutes into it. We set the stage of, are we overthinking parenting? So let me ask you, what is the biggest? Well, tell us. Your kids are 9 and
8 and 6.
8 and 6. Two boys.
2 boys.
Two boys. I got two girls. 9 and 6. So we're in the same. It's got like kind of parallel stories. Like we've kind of like reached our enough point, similar child to first gen, you kind of mindsets, right? Still very driven. I bet. Do you know your Enneagram type?
I don't.
3. You're probably a 3 achiever. So similar stage there. So let me ask you, when you think about being a parent, what is the thing that you're most nervous about?
Having spoiled ass kids
Spoiled ass kids.
that don't know any different. It's not their fault. This is what this was their oxygen. The other day we were at a cousin's house and all our kids are similar ages. And one of the cousins was like, it would be really cool to fly some. My kids were talking about where we had been this summer. And the cousin was like, it would be really cool to get on a plane. And I was like, oh shit. My kid, my oldest, who was the one talking, has probably flown 100,000 miles at 8 years old. Right? That's probably a little much because he's 8. So it's probably closer to, no, it's probably close to 100,000. And you go, man, like and it's not his fault, right? It's that it's the oxygen. Oh, what'd you do this summer? Oh, this is what I did. Oh, what'd you do this summer? And like those little moments, they take little chunks out of you because I'm not going to not live the life I want to live and take my kids where I want to take them. But you go, man, that's my kid's oxygen. So how can I help to put other things in the air to help my kid not grow up to be like, that's normal and to realize that we're privileged. And that's why it's one of the big reasons why I will always live in the city. Because the lack of privilege is outside of my front door.
Yeah.
I don't have to take my kids 30 miles away to some freaking soup kitchen. Like there are homeless people that sleep on our front step. There are homeless people that charge their phone in on my freaking electric socket on the front of my house. Right. And sometimes we open the door and see that. And I get to have conversations with my kids about what our role is in this world with our enough and what we need to do. It's very important for me to continue to live in this city. Otherwise, living on a cul-de-sac with a bunch of other CEOs like you and me, I think then your kid it becomes even more oxygen because that's what everybody else does. And as people are listening to this, please stop reacting to kids when they travel a lot as telling them how great it is and how worldly they are. Because when kids are young, they pick up on the fact that that's something to lead in with. So I started watching how adults would be like, oh my God, you went to there and there. That's amazing. That's so great for your kids. They're so worldly. And your kids are just seeking attention. It's not their fault. So now they realize, oh, if I say I went to Virginia, people are like, yeah, cool. If I say I went to Venezuela or Rio de Janeiro, people are like, wow, that's amazing. And like kids are being like, oh, so I should talk about those trips instead. Not that I went to grandma's for a week, in Virginia this summer. So yeah, That's all the thoughts on that.
That cuts deep, man, because I would have said entitled, which is a version of what you had. What did you say? Spoiled ass brats or something?
Spoiled ass kids, man.
Spoiled ass kids. And the oxygen thing, it really, I give you a story. So I have a friend, similar, like kind of first generation, worked his butt off, had a hedge fund, and sent his kid to this amazing private school in New York, like Dalton or Collegiate or one of those schools. And he would always get into a fight with his 10-year-old son over one thing. And a rule that my friend had, which was no private jets for birthday parties. Because there were a few kids in the class, hedge fund dads, moms, dads, presumably dads,
Yep.
where they would fly 8, 10-year-olds to Deer Valley for a ski trip.
Yep.
And my son, my friend was like, not on my watch. You will not, like, that is not a normal experience for a 10-year-old boy. No, it doesn't matter what dad has done. And it's so extreme that you can kind of laugh about it. But you and I are like, my kids could conceivably go to that school. And so they could conceivably have maybe not that situation, but a watered down version of that. And to me, like, once I laugh at it, I'm like, that's so fucking funny. Then I'm like, but it's not the kid's fault, right? That's his, like, the dad put him in, to use your phrase, that oxygen, right? And you like, no, like, don't become friends with Joey. His dad has a private jet, or so I wonder that question of the, like, what do you expose your kids? And then on the flip side of it is, like, we grew up like lower middle class. I've spoken to you, I've shared on this podcast, like, I got jumped a bunch of times as a kid.
Yeah, I remember listening to that.
I have always physical safety, and I was small, and like, Asians were like usually like taught, like, my dad still, he has a green card. He still like dresses up to go through customs, like it's like a real fear of like authority and like safety, like we don't belong. So like we have all that Asianness that, like, when you feel like unsafe, we're not taught to fight back. We're taught to, like, not put yourself in that unsafe situation again,
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that messed with me. And so I do, like, have safety, scars, so to speak. And then, but I live now in what you said. I live in the cul-de-sac. I live in the place where the public school hits you up, and they're like, you can donate appreciated stock to our campaign and get a huge I mean, that's like our public school system is like a $50 million endowment
for public school. That's
public
crazy,
school,
bro. I'm like, I get stuff kind of like that, but I'm in private.
Yeah, our public school has that. And so, but at the same time, yesterday, Halloween, we're recording on November 1st, my 9-year-old she can, there's no worries. Right. And I want that, especially, I hated living in New York as a kid. And so I kind of want for her to not feel that fear that I had. But then I'm like, and if I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, if there were homeless people charging their phones on my property, like, that would elicit that fear of, like, is my family safe? Like, am I safe? And I wouldn't. Yeah. And so there's no question here, but there is this, like, actually here's one, there's like one theory that I've had on this. And the theory was like, this is so fucking lame, but it's just, this is where my mind goes. The theory is to take your kids to a place that is almost gentrified. That's like in the middle of gentrification. So you have like you have the development tide in your favor, right? So you like better, like cleaner, safer, all that. But you still have that, like, kind of like the diversity, like it's not been like completely whitewashed. Like the neighborhood isn't, and the schools haven't been completely, like, you go to schools in the public schools in Brooklyn in certain neighborhoods, it's like all hedge fund managers, right? Like it's still a public school, but it's not really a public school, kind of like the public schools we go to. And so it's like, oh, like I think I live in LA, so I'm like, oh, Long Beach, right? Like Long Beach is kind of up and coming. It's super diverse, but there's really nice pockets, but it's still like it's definitely middle class compared to Brentwood or Manhattan Beach. But then I'm like, hey, you're kind of like, I've also learned an important lesson in my life is like, it's like if if you're ever trying to toe the line with the perfect solution, your perfect solution is fragile. Like it's like a starting, like
Mm,
you're in a your system is fragile. So like
uh-huh.
your perfect solution is gonna break either like on the side, like your kid gets jumped and you're like, oh, we got there a little too early, or you got there a little
Oh,
too late, and you're like, oh, it turns out it's all hedge fund managers, So it's like your perfect
damn.
solution is actually not perfect. So I don't know. What do you? There's a
You
lot
know,
there. There's no real question about it. What does that
but
elicit?
I did the same calculus you did. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
a parent. Like, I want my kids to be freaking safe, and I had to just,
Mm,
like, look at the math, look at the numbers, and then I think I feel safe when there's numbers 'cause I'm just trying to break I'm trying to break the natural state. So, I'll be like, "Okay, well, how many people die from, like, car accidents, like,
mm,
driving?" I don't drive as much, so there it sounds less tragic to be like, "Will died in a car accident," than, like, somebody put a gun to his head, shot and killed him while he was putting his kid in his car, which happened to
mm.
somebody at one of my kids' schools, happened to a father that was just, like, 10 blocks away. It
How
happened once 10 years ago, but it'll stick. What doesn't
it's,
stick is people die every day driving their kids to school, people get hit in
yeah,
crosswalks, things happen, just doesn't stick the same
mhm,
way as, like, good dad shot by bad kid in robbery, right? So
ye
I try to look at the numbers and crunch the numbers
Uh,
and the statistics so that I'm not like, am I really risking my kid, or are there like millions of kids
yeah.
that grow up in cities that end up just fine,
mm,
learn how to navigate those systems, etc. So, no, at, at least for me, the more like I don't know. Luckily, me and my wife are on the same page with this, but
Yeah.
like me being in the city exposes me to having to have conversations with my kids really early,
Yeah.
and it also gives my kids an opportunity for me to just consistently talk about what our responsibility is to the broader society. It becomes a
mhm,
almost weekly conversation, if not daily, because it's in my face. So I don't have to
yeah,
remember to create. I don't have to write something on the wall
Wow.
because it's
mm,
always there. There's always
Yeah.
somebody we could help. The other thing I'll tell you that hit me, man, I was listening to Ramit Sethi's podcast, and I was in through about 60 of them before um, it hit me. And he interviewed somebody, and I also realized that as a child, I was raised to not like rich people. And
mhm,
I think that's a part of what's dialed up in my head now with like
oh,
trying to not be around and spend time around rich people. It makes me very uncomfortable. I always say they're
mm,
not my people, right? Because when you're the black kid from the poorest town that goes to a private school, your parents are like, just because they got more money than you don't mean they're better than you. See how it comes full
mhm,
circle?
Yeah.
Like you're gonna be invited into the not private jets, but like parents with nice homes and finished basements and stuff
mm,
like that. Never let so my mom was first of all like, I'm gonna make sure you know how to use all the right equipment at dinner so people don't think
mm,
you're ignorant and you don't know better, right? So that you're not
mhm,
judged on that. But then they're not better than you. I think one of the most deep
God,
questions
your
to ask
mom.
people. Oh my God, she's a baller, man.
Yeah.
But so then you were raised to be like, these people aren't
mhm,
better than me. These people aren't better than me, right?
mm,
And then when you become one of them, you realize,
mm,
oh shit.
mm,
Am I now the parent that other parents, when their kids come over to my house and I've
mm,
got the theater and the this and the that, they're like, those people aren't better than us. Or when their kids don't fly and have never been on
Yeah.
a plane,
Yeah.
they're like, just because those kids have flown a bunch of places, they're not better than you. I'm like, oh my God, like that seems like everybody's cheering for you and how successful you are on this side. And you're like,
Yeah.
successful at what? Because now my kids, I think, are the kids that other parents say when you go over their house, just remember they're not better than us. Right. And you're like,
Yeah.
fuck, man, like
Uh,
I don't want to carry that, But
yeah.
my
Oh
company did
man.
what it did and I worked and it turned
Here
out the
we
way
are
it
overthinking.
it turned out the way it did, but you're like, "Oh shit, man." Like that's something that I honestly carry on a daily basis. It's a shame. Like I try to hide my wealth from every parent, from
Yeah.
everybody I come across because I just want to be I don't want to do that to other people's families, and points of comparison. A kid opened the door at Halloween yesterday. We go to open the door. It's one of our neighbors. They're across the street. We opened the door, and the kid's first words out of their mouths was, "Your house is huge," and I was like, "Fuck."
Mm,
The parents
mm,
there, I'm there, and I'm just like, "Oh, here's candy,
yeah.
whatever." But you're like, kids pick up on this stuff, man, and
Yeah.
like that's
Your
not
kids or their
their
kids, right?
kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? And it's like, we live across the street from you. We see you guys at your house all the time, but my house is kind of subdued on the front so that people don't
Mhm.
know how big it is in the back. But when you open the front door,
Yeah.
people can see it. And
Mhm.
like, and I don't know, that just made me, it just takes a little bit of the wind out of my sails a little bit.
Have your kids ever asked, are we rich?
All the time. They know we
How do you
are.
answer?
They know we are. They don't ask
Oh.
us if we are. They say,
Oh.
we are wealthy. They said that to my,
Okay.
one of my, one of my nieces, and my niece is like 22, and she's like, "I was talking to your kid," and he was like, "Well, because we're wealthy, blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "I don't even fucking talk like that, bro. Like, how did you
Where do
even
you
get
think
that?
that came from? Yeah.
Dude, people pick
School?
up that. That's what I'm saying. Like when
Yeah.
your kids are traveling and doing these things, adults
Yeah.
start saying this shit to your kids."
Oh, yeah.
And your kids come back with language that you're like, we don't talk about ourselves that way.
Yeah.
So where did that
You
get
probably
picked
never
up?
called yourself wealthy, right?
Well, when people even call me successful, I have a blog post from 10 years ago, 12 years ago that's like, don't ever call me successful. It's why my
Yeah.
Twitter handle's like, I am whatever you say I am. Like, I got sick of
Mm.
fighting people on being like, call me successful. You don't know if I'm home with my kids, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hate that concept of like, oh, you're successful. Yeah, maybe at business. I could be failing at life. I could be failing in my other roles as a father and a son and an uncle and other things like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, tell me about your success. It's like,
Well, so you said something like, I want to, every day they know what their responsibility is. I'm paraphrasing.
yeah, no.
What is, say, what do you mean by that? Like, can you give an example?
Let me give you a story.
Okay.
So in my old house where I live, which is just around the corner, but it was under 95, man. So as a result,
Not as big.
it was not as big, but it was under 95. That was the problem. So we had a lot of homeless people around, and I didn't do DoorDash because I was like, I'm not paying those fees and shit. Like that's ridiculous.
Dude, that's
Um,
my
right?
daughter. She's like, I can't believe people DoorDash coffee. I'm like, yes, I'm raising.
Yes, yes.
That's a
Oh my
win. That's a
God.
W.
Dude, I saw a girl working at a jerk chicken stand the other day, order a Starbucks to drop off for her. I'm like, you can't, like, what? But anyway, DoorDash. So we didn't do it, but then during the pandemic, my wife and I wanted some normalcy, and we go out to restaurants and we eat at our favorite place. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start buying DoorDash so that we can have our restaurants back that we like to go to. And then one day, my kid said to me, my oldest, he goes, "You use your phone now to get food dropped off at the house." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "There's two homeless guys across the street." I'm like, "Yeah." And at the time he was 6, bro. And he goes,
Yeah.
"Can't you order food on your phone to feed them since it can be dropped at our house?" And like, that was one of those moments where I was just like, I think I'm doing something right here. Because my kid connected the dots on his own and
Nice.
challenged
Yep.
me.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, okay, this like having my kids be constantly around this stuff is making them connect
Mhm.
dots in their daily environment, that we
Yeah.
have a responsibility to help people with what we have. And I think everybody,
Mhm.
whether you have anything or not, you can always find somebody to help. But I think
Yeah.
those things are like my early signals that maybe some of this stuff is starting to sink in.
Do you think? Do you have any other ways other than living in a city? This is a selfish question.
Nope.
Where it's like, I can't. So
I
I
got the cheat code,
volunteer.
bro. I got the
Yeah.
cheat code. It's the easiest thing, right? It's the
'Cause people will say
easiest thing.
So you talk to other wealthy families and they'll be like, well, just travel and travel. I'm like, bro, when we travel, we stay at fucking Four Seasons and we're eating like $18 fucking breakfast. That they're not fucking seeing the world. I mean, they're seeing the world, but like, and I have many friends that have like taken their kids. They're like literally glamping in Africa. And like they're like, here, and I'm mocking it, but I probably will also do it at some point. It's like, here, kids, is a lion, and the lion's like, they like seduce the lion with some antler
Right.
meat, They probably like paid off the lion, like the lion's in on this stick, like, yo, Simba, I got you.
I got a place for you if you ever don't want that experience. I got a place for you if you don't want that
So
experience.
yes, and I think it's not enough for me to use the like safety. And I have 2 girls, and I don't think it's enough for me to use the safety thing. I think I have to like call bullshit on myself. It's like, okay, bro, I like nice shit. And so if I'm going to travel, I don't want to show like destitute, like eat crap and, so like we're staying at nice hotels but I'm like, so thank you for being so direct that like, no, travel, like there is a way to travel, but the way that many people listening to this podcast travel is not the way to show your
Yeah,
kids there's a different world.
because of fear, right? Like, so here's
Yeah.
what's crazy. Like, so my wife does work in rural Nicaragua. Like, people live
Okay.
in 10 sheds, and she's been doing that work for 25 years, right? She started the nonprofit with her friend back when they were much younger. And her mother's the same way. Her name is Momo. That's what we call her. She'll be here in a little bit to take the kids. And Momo has been going to Guatemala with a nonprofit that she's been working with for ages. So my kids just went to Guatemala for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks to do language class. And they got to
Wow.
meet the people that Momo has been working with
Yeah.
for like 10 years. And she's in their houses. And these are the people that put Momo up in their house. There is no, in the places that they go in Guatemala and Hocotenango and in Nicaragua, which is Waslala, in those two places, there are no hotels, right? Until recently.
Yeah.
So
So your kids were there.
so, dude, yeah. Well, I was there.
You were
When
the whole family.
I
Yeah.
wasn't there this most recent time, but when I went to Nicaragua with my wife, she's like, there is a hotel now in Waslala. Look how far they've come. Before she
Yeah.
had to stay in the priest's house because that was the only place she could stay, right? Talk
Yeah.
about safety. Well, dude, your wife is going somewhere, there's no internet, and you can't get in touch with her for a week. You just drop her off at the airport and hope she shows back up.
Yeah.
She's with people you don't know. It's shit scary, but that's for another
Yeah.
day. With this, my kids have been in places that I would say not often, but they're like, holy shit, there's like kids begging for food here. And that's like every day. Like there are people that are like riding in buses where they're sitting on top of the bus and they're putting
Yeah.
their luggage on top of the bus and the bus is going over unpaved roads. And it's like, wow, like any place that has a Four Seasons
Yeah.
ain't gonna ever teach your kids shit about what it's like to live in a place that's not America
Yeah.
kind of shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, developed the modern West.
Yeah.
Let me ask, do your kids do volunteer? Because I also like I've taken my kids to like soup kitchens and things like that. I just feel like that's, I don't know. I'm glad I do it, but it feels very performative.
Better than the alternative, bro.
No.
You're putting yourself in a position to have conversations with your kids that might not be without that being the catalyst, wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I would
I
say
think that's a
don't beat yourself
powerful
up too
thing.
much with that, bro.
Yeah. I think that's a powerful thing. It's like what can catalyze the conversation, right?
That's it. That's
Yeah,
it. So you know what?
yeah.
Because what's
Ooh,
your
that's good.
alternative? Like otherwise you do, what can you do? Like it's
Yeah.
hard, bro. Like, so no, I think that's really good. And my kids do similar kinds of things. One of the things that we do is we carry bags of food in our car. We make Ziploc
yeah.
bags. So we go to Target like once a month and we load up all these Ziploc bags. And then whenever we're at a stoplight and we see a homeless person, my kids will like put their hand out the window and give them some food, right? Or give them and it was crazy to watch the tentacles of that.
Yeah.
I think all we're looking for, like, this is why I like being surrounded by good people, because like that's not my idea. That came from my friend Kat Caulfold, and she came over our house and she said that she was doing that coming from New Jersey, driving over into Philly. But I'm like, well, wait, I never thought to do that. I've been in homeless youth advocacy for 15
Yeah.
years, and I never thought of that. So now we've got the thing in our house that also has a bunch of bags in them. So when people
Yeah.
come to visit, we're like, yo, you might see some homeless people when you leave living in the city.
I love
Therefore, here's
that.
some bags for you. What that does, that makes somebody put their window down with these scary people and realize when they say God bless you and thank you, that you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's not so scary. So now we're using that to chip away a bit at this
Yeah.
perception, right? And then my kids are also making these things and they're putting their hand out the window and they're making contact with people that they're not
Yeah.
keeping at a distance. And that's making my kids realize that we got a responsibility here because they're going to be in positions
Yeah.
that I won't be there to guide them
Yeah.
on, right? But I want them to have at their core that like they remember that this is something that's part of what our family does for other people.
Yeah. I love that. And, it's funny because you had tweeted that at me, or we had tweeted about this story of like having bags with things to give to homeless people in your car. And I talked to my wife and we both have this kind of like base layer of fear where it was just like, yeah, it's like fentanyl and like, junkies and, it's like, and I think it immediately, the idea just died on the vine, but I'm just like I'm calling, it's like kind of like calling bullshit on yourself. Like we were talking about the partner that's like, oh, I'm just like doing it for my kids. Like, kid, like if you're really that scared, there's ways to mitigate. Like, it's not that scary. There's ways to mitigate that fear. Try it and see if it's really scary, ABC. And so I thank you for saying that, because I do, like, I think it's very easy. Like I'm trying, but I also can like just talk myself out, like away from things because of, a convenient narrative, or because I genuinely am afraid.
If it makes you feel any better, I almost did the same thing. The first time some homeless person sat on my stoop and charged their phone, my first thought was, oh, I should either get rid of that charge. I'm like, why do they put a power outlet in the front of my house? Like, I live in the city and I have a driveway actually that goes into the back. So I'm never going to be out front needing to vacuum my car or something. I'm like, why did the contractor put an outlet on the front of my house? I was like, dude, what? And then the person pulled out the phone, they pulled the thing out. So like now it's kind of like dangling a little bit. And my first instinct was like, let me get one with a lock on it or get a brick and put it in there and be done with it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, that's not my values though. I was like, wait. Like I can't be out on stage and going out in 2 weeks. I'm going to sleep outside to raise money for homeless kids. My 13th time doing it. I think if I raise enough money this time, I'll eclipse 300 grand raised. I can't be that guy. And then because it's like, you know what?
Yeah.
If I don't leave my stoop open for people to charge their phones, it's like, then all we're doing is shutting our doors on people. And I'm going to share a story with you that I don't talk about often. I got a cousin. She got a full ride to college, got knocked up in her freshman year, and was afraid to tell the family and like ran off, right? Luckily, we got back the 2 kids into the family, and they're doing great today. But I have no idea where my cousin is on a regular basis. And there was a time somebody recently found her on Facebook or whatnot. But for years, I had no idea if she was alive or dead, if she was on the streets or safe, happy or sad. And what I've always kind of dialed into my head is every one of these people is somebody's, I won't say her name, it's somebody's my cousin, right? And if somebody walked by my cousin, would I want them to let her charge? If that's the only lifeline she has to stay in touch with people and to move her money around, I want people to do that for her. Well, guess what? The person sitting on my stoop that I wish wasn't there and at least shit all over my fucking stoop that I got to clean up, that's somebody else's my cousin.
Yeah.
And you know what? How can I expect or hope that the world takes care of my cousin if I don't take care of this person who's somebody else's son, daughter, father, cousin? Somebody cares about that person. And if I don't take the time to do something about it, then how the fuck can I expect if my family's ever destitute or somebody in my family's off and they need help, that somebody's going to help them? Paying it forward, straight up.
Man.
Thank you.
Took me a while to get there, though.
Yeah.
Took me a while to get there.
Yeah. And I think, like, again, people are not, I'm not having this conversation often, ever. The one you and I are having. Right.
That's why you're doing this thing. We're here.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Bad friends, bro. Like, just conversations with people.
People are listening. Let me ask you how do you, our kids are still young, but how are you thinking about like money, like giving them or not giving them money? Like, we haven't even gotten to the phase of allowance. I'll tell you one thing that's starting to happen now, because we live in a very wealthy neighborhood. It's just like everyone just has so much stuff. They just like buy new clothes, this. Like, I was the kind of kid, it's like you get a backpack, it lasts you 2 years. You get a pair of sneakers, it lasts you 1 year, maybe 2. And like we bought, Nike, like, dude, kids Nikes are like $120 now. Like, it's crazy. I'm like, I was 21 when I bought myself my first $100 plus pair of shoes.
Facts.
Right? And like, you're 9 and then now like 3 months later, it's like, oh, like, can I get Doc Martens? Like, you know how much kids Doc Martens are? Like $150. Like, you just got the fucking Nikes,
Dude, facts.
And so, I'm struggling with, and my kids know that they still ask, like, are we rich? Because there's way richer people than us here. Way richer. You could just tell by like people's ski trips. Like that will tell you like
Oh my
the
God.
level of rich. But my daughter always, I'll give you my daughter, my 9-year-old, she just always wants stuff. She's the kid that she has the case of the gimmies. You go to Target, she needs a gum, like she needs gum or like hand sanitizer. You go to the grocery store, she needs a Kinder Egg. You go to the Gap, she needs a new sweatshirt. You go to a paper source, she needs a new notebook. Like, and so my parents, God bless them, they haven't done us any favors because every time they see them, my dad slips my daughter a 50. Yeah, I'm like, no one's giving us $50. And my dad worked his fucking ass off.
Right.
Let him have the joy of giving a 9-year-old
Also
$50.
that.
Like, give
Also
him that
that.
moment.
Also
Like, who am I
that.
to deprive him of that moment? So she has her money, which is actually a lot because we see my dad like 3 times a year. So she's getting like $150 a year just from my dad. So I keep it, and there's a spreadsheet. So she keeps wanting stuff. And so we kind of have this thing where it's like, you can use your money to buy one thing once per month. And we haven't set like a limit, like 10, 15 bucks. And then I'll buy you one thing a month, like 10, 15 bucks. That's still 20. I did not get 24 things a year. And this excludes sneakers and like stuff for school, right? But I get upset because I'm like, and I read a lot of Eastern philosophy. Desire is suffering. And I'm like, your desires are untethered. But here's the thing. I was exactly like her. And so I'm like, maybe this is just a universal kid thing, not just a wealthy kid thing. And so I don't know. How do you, how do you think about like, because at some point we're going to give them money. Like, we're going to give them an allowance. Is it going to be the lower court? Is it going to be the lower quartile? Like, are you going to like take the mean of the kid? Like, I mean, dude, in my school, there's 7th graders with 7-year-olds with iPhone 15s. And we're telling our daughter we're holding up high school. Yeah, right. Good luck
And
with
you're
that.
like
But that's
holding one for dear life. Like, because everybody else just keeps getting.
So, I mean, how do you think of like, what can you like buying them things, allowance?
I want my kids to work for shit, like, so if my kid wanted, I don't want to not get some, we'll have to see if my wife is down with this, but I'm like, I don't care if my kid ends up with a Porsche. But what we're going to tell our kid is you have to save up X% of your car purchase. And if the kid saves up 30 grand, is like, yo, Pop, you got to match my 30. Well, then the lesson that I wanted him to learn, he learned, which is he said no to a lot of stuff to get the thing he thought he wanted.
So delayed gratification.
Yeah, I think that's the approach I'm probably going to take. I also, like, if I drop dead, if me and my wife drop dead at the same time, you have to have a will that says what happens with the kids. Yep. And, they each get half of the median value of a home in our zip code. So that way they could put money down on a house, which you have to work out in your will if you have a really good. This is why these online wills and shit, it's like, gotta be a little careful. But like, because we worked with somebody to work with us on it, they're like, well, what happens if one of your kids is disabled and can't work? Like, they're legit disabled and can't work. Then the taxes would kill them because you gave them enough money to get half the house, but then the taxes would kill them if they couldn't work. And you're like, ooh. So we had to set up certain accounts and stuff if certain things happen. But I figured, all right, so if the median household house in our neighborhood, let's just say let's say it's 350, 400,000.
Okay.
Each kid gets 200.
In the neighborhood that you live in.
In the neighborhood
today.
that we live in. Yeah. Each kid gets, 200 if we both drop dead. And the rest of our money goes out to charity and whatnot, because that's a really good head start. My parents looked me in the face and they couldn't give me money for my first house that I got. They wish they could have, but they couldn't. If I give you half, and that means that you get to stay in the same neighborhood you grew up in, you don't have to go somewhere else, right? You can stay in the same neighborhood you grew up in and drop a 50% down payment on a house. Then I think I did my job for you, bro. That's a good setup. Whatever you do after that, let the worms come and eat me. But like, I'm not going to feel bad about it.
We have a men's group. And by the way, if anyone's listening, wants more information, radreads.co/coaching. We have a men's group with people, I'm calling it post-achievement professionals. So like they've made their money.
Ooh, I like that phrase.
They still need to work. Like they still kind of need to work. Like they can't stop completely, but they have a ton of options. And they're actually wrestling with a lot of the questions of like my legacy, my identity, like my, all of these like questions. And so that's kind of like blog posts coming on the post-achievement professional.
That's important work. Wait, I'm just going to stop and tell you, I just was at a thing where we talk to people that are in a similar position, and it's a lonely place to be because you can't really talk to people about those problems, but they eat you up every day. Every day you and I are thinking, man, I got these kids, and you know what, dude? Like you think you got them, the old phrase was, I'm gonna kick you out when you're 18, my dad would talk. But like, really, you only get to mold them until they're probably about, look at the things we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Like, you got less control over how these kids end up than you think, because your kids, my kids, are already influenced by these adults that are like, oh, you went on vacation. And so when your kid's like, well, I guess I should talk about that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, these kids have like iPhone 15s, and I guess like that's a thing. And so you're like, man, we don't have that much time to try to really be the main molder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and Friends, we're just on the cusp of Friends, just like usurping them.
Right. So we don't have that much time. And, I think it's so important. It sounds so bougie to say, but it's like, it's really important for people, whatever your problems are. We don't get to tell people what their problems are allowed to be. And I know I wake up every day trying to be like, how can I keep my kids on this path for as long as I have them moldable? Right. And if somebody were to say, okay, well, where do you go to do that? I'm like, well, thank God I got connected with this group that has these round tables, but it's a bunch of like super ultra high wealth people, of which I'm on the bottom rung, of course. But, you're like, that's a really exclusive place. That's not posted and advertised for people to join and whatnot. But that's a real, I'm telling you, brother, I carried around so much. Before I had this meeting last week, I had spent the last 6 years of my life only having one person I could talk to about this kind of stuff. And how to raise my kids and whatnot in a way where I could be fully transparent. Because the problem is, if you're not being fully transparent, you're trying to like hide stuff, and then people can't really help you or give you advice, because really the advice ain't going to hit because you're trying to act some kind of way. And I think it's a really important thing that you're doing there, because it is. It's a lonely, I hate to say it because it sounds horrible to say, but I get to choose what makes my life stressful, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of those areas of stress.
Yeah. So thank you for saying that. The funny thing too about that group of the like ultra wealthy is that people who don't have high levels of wealth they can hold the idea that I will be happy once I have the wealth. Like the thing that's preventing me from being happy is I don't have the money. The people with the money have had that dream shattered, or not shattered, but gut checked.
Gut checked. Right.
There's nothing left to grasp. And there is, because it's like no one wants to hear very rich people complain about being, how sad they are, or how, then they're just like, it's very isolationist. Okay. So we had this men's group, we had this conversation, and the general consensus amongst many of these people is like, we're going to leave way more than we have earned. And I think, look, even if you work as an engineer in Facebook and you don't have like a ridiculous lifestyle, you're going to pay for your kids' college, and you have half a brain in investing. You're going to have more money than you spend. And so a lot of where people land, and again, to our listeners, I know that some of this might sound super, super high, the realm of privilege, and I acknowledge that, that there was a few things. They're like, well, I want to pay for their education so they don't have to incur student debt. So that was one kind of general consensus, was like, I'm going to give my kids a debt-free college degree. And then the other one was some version of what you just said, which is, and I've talked about this with my wife as well, is like help towards a starter home, right? And I love how you define that. It's like half of the median value of our neighborhood. My kids are like licking their chops. They're like, we live in one of the highest real estate. Like you said 400, median here is like 725. So they're like, oh, we won the math game on this one. But even then, let me tell you what we started to talk this through in this group, and it got complicated because it was like, well, what if when someone called me, they're like, hey, you're anti-home buying. And I'm like, yeah, I like renting. And so it's like, well, what if one of your kids says, I want to rent? Will you take the down payment money and just pay the rent like in installments? I'm like, oh no, but like there's something nice about like the home. Like you can't like go bet it all on black. And, it's like a thing that they have. It's an appreciating asset. And so there was like all these edge cases started to come out. Another one was like, what if you don't like their spouse? You're like, I'm going to dump this money, but I hate your spouse. Like, I think they're a bad person. Or like, and it was just funny.
Cool.
That I just get you to the conclusion, and we could circle back. At the conclusion, all of us were just like, it's so much easier to just like give whatever lump you want to give when you're gone. So you don't have to actually like live with all of the permutations. And really, there are consequences. I think what you and I are saying here is like, there's a lot of consequences to the decisions that you make, particularly with money, with your kid at different phases of their lives.
Yeah. This is why I think it's helpful for people to have a person join those groups who has seen the outcome of these decisions. Right?
Yeah.
So if you can find some way to bring somebody in, it's like, hey, I have done a lot of estates.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of parents have things happen.
Like the one
and I've seen what happened with the kids. So what you're saying might work out this way, that way. I think that could be a really valuable addition to that group, because we have these dreams of how it works out. And then somebody hits you with the reality, like, what if you don't like their spouse? You're like, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
But my belief on these things, I'm going to mention this to some guy who was very intent on telling me how he sold his business for billions at this thing I was at last week. But I was like, I take an approach to, once you give it away, it's not yours anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you come up with, like there's all these tentacles, and it's like and I was explaining them through my lens of homelessness, and just being like, if I give somebody who's homeless money, I do not care if they buy a beer with it, buy wine, shoot drugs with it, or whatever. You know why? Because at the end of my day, I get to relax after my long and stressful day with a glass of wine. I think it's probably not the best job to sit on the streets inhaling people's fumes, having people drive right by you, having all your dignity out in the open for people to see with your sign. That might be a hard day for somebody. Could you imagine that? And the guy was like, yeah. I'm like, so who the fuck am I to tell that guy what to do with the $5 I gave him? Right.
Yeah.
So similarly, when it comes to your kids, I think, you can go crazy trying to think through all the tentacles.
Yeah.
And I think you also have to just sometimes just know in your heart what you're trying to do. And say, it might not go the way that I thought.
Yeah.
I'll be dead, so I won't know. It depends on what you think about, like, the afterlife. So,
yeah.
But, like, I won't know, and I won't be here to see it. But I know in my heart what it will communicate to my children is like, just because you have money doesn't mean you try to store it all and pass it down to people.
Yeah.
Instead, maybe there's other people who could use it more. And then hopefully they take that broader lesson from what we do, and however they execute on it, let it be.
What I love that. And when you said the thing about like the parent that wouldn't give their kid anything, and it made the kid feel like the dad didn't love them, or the parent did, I'm just like, oh my, I was like, yo, you can't wait. It's like you like make them earn it. They feel unloved. You give them too much, they're like doing lines at 18, It's like,
my lines. I'm always like, I don't want my kids to be doing lines at 18.
Yeah. So, oh man, but that reminds me of a quote. I think we talked about this the first time you and I talked on the phone, which is, you have the right to do the work, but you don't have the right to the fruits of your work.
Bro, when you sent me that email afterwards, I tucked it away because I know I still need to respond to you on it. Things have been crazy the last 6 weeks. That really hit. I cannot wait to revisit that email. I'll get back to you in 2 weeks. After all my travel done in 2 weeks. But yeah, right. You don't have, No, I could chat with you forever, man.
So, okay. So one last question, or one last train of thought. Are your kids in private school?
Yeah.
Is it like a nice private school, presumably?
Mm-hmm.
So we're in public, but like I said, it's a public with a $50 million endowment, so it's a private school. I'm donating, let's say I'm donating stock every year to my kids' public education so they can have makerspace. But one thing I've been reading about and kind of starting to see is it just was easier to be a kid. I mean, we grew up middle class, we grew up differently, but I'm already starting to see, and that it's very well documented for older kids, that the pressure on kids is crazy. And especially in these, like, they call them super zips. And it's not, so I read this book, it's called Good Enough by Jennifer, or Never Enough by Jennifer Brandy Wallace. I'll send you, I did a summary of it. But basically, she says that if you take schools where the kids test in the top 25% of ACT or SAT, standardized tests, so top 25%. And so that's public and private. It's like large swaths of the country, right? And this is not just LA, New York, and Philly. It's like New Mexico and Maine and Houston. It's all over the country. Those kids, specifically those kids in the top 25%, have similar tendencies, probabilities of substance abuse, clinical depression, clinical anxiety as three groups. Kids who just moved to the United States, kids in the foster system, and kids who have incarcerated parents.
You got to send me that, bro. That's deep.
So that is just, but the crazy thing is when you go from the 25th to the 50th percentile, that's not the case. So it's only in that like achievement. It's because of this, like the snake eating its own head of achievement, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I have observed this, and you and I similar. We're new friends, but soul, like old soul buddies.
Yeah, man.
We're competitive, we're driven, we do what we say we're going to do, we're principled, and kids internal. So there's a few arguments that the book makes. One is that it's very much like, let's say, like kids in my kids' school, they have Mandarin tutors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say that every kid in your class has let's say as a parent, you say like, I opt out. I think this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing Mandarin tutors, but every other kid has a Mandarin tutor.
Mm-hmm.
You opting out doesn't mean your kid gets to opt out of the system, because they're the ones that have to go and be with those kids. Those are their peers. Those are their friends. Those are eventually the kids applying to college with them. So it's like the system. You could use sports, tutoring, all these massive complexes where there's all this money being thrown into this. And so as a parent, you could be like, well, I don't care where my kid goes to college. But if every single one of their friends is like, I'm going to go to Yale, I'm going to go to USC, I'm going to go to this, it doesn't matter what the parent cares. It's like, it's much deeper. It's the system. It's not just the individual choice of the parent, right? So you can opt out of the game for your kid, but you can't opt out of the system that they exist in every day.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, so that's one thing that I've been thinking about is like, how do you, because I literally, I don't care where my kids go to college. I don't even care if they go to college. I want them to try. I want them to be kind. I want them to know their responsibility. I want them to have life skills, like look people in the eye and, say what they're going to like, do what they're, do what they say they're going to do. I want them to like have like some opinions on things, like maybe
same, dude.
but I don't care. But so I don't care if they go to college. I definitely don't care if they go to Yale, which is where I went. But I'm on the board of Yale fundraising. When my kids were born, Yale sent them teddy bear or bulldogs, the mascot. And they had they know his name's Dan, like Handsome Dan is the Yale mascot. So even, and they pick there was like the thing you were saying with the dads who like didn't validate the kids or like they pick up on the cues, right? So it's not what you say, it's what you do. So I'll plant those two threads. One is like, there's a system, and if your kids are in the system, whether you opt in or out of many of the decisions that come with the system, that's one. And then the second one is like, you can say things like, I don't care where my kids go to college, but there's a lot of subtext in your behaviors that kids might hear. It's like, oh, not only does dad not want me to, not only does dad care that I go to college, again, dad wants me to go to Yale because he's so proud of his alma mater and this, and they even sent me a fucking bulldog when I was born, and then and all that. So I wondered, and especially because you and I can see we didn't have this problem as kids. My parents were like, college, like you just go to the one that's open.
Like, who's giving you the most money, kid? Like, who's giving you the biggest scholarship? Like,
so that there was no like decision axes around college in my, and so I don't know. Do you have thoughts on either the systemic point or it's what you model versus what you say?
both. Like, I think, unfortunately, diversity has become about the color of our skin.
Mm.
And it's like, well, if everybody's going to Yale, I should go to Yale. Well, then you don't have fucking diversity, right? The system is a function of the diversity of where you are, where you live, or where you go to school or whatever. So the system is built off of a lack of diversity. And people keep running around being like, well, if there's some brown kids in the school, we have diversity. It's like, not if they're all going to fucking Yale and everybody else is. You got one type of diversity, but you've given up another type, which again, for me is solved by living in the city, right? Like I have people, my neighbor, my immediate neighbor next door, well, the house next door to me is a shell. My neighbor next door to that, he does like odd jobs. Like he works on people's roofs and shit, like in the neighborhood, right? That's my neighbor.
Yeah.
So therefore, right? Like my
not
system,
a knowledge worker.
right? Not a knowledge worker. So therefore my system is one where I have my kids' school. Yeah, there's a system. But once they leave that school and come to our home, and like they're in the city, and my city, my school is very connected to the city. So they make our kids talk to community organizers in different places and stuff. So that they learn the plight of different people in our city. And then you mentioned the words like the subtext of something, and I forget.
Oh, it was just like if you say to your kid, I don't care that you go to college or not, but then you wear a Yale t-shirt every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
So remember how I said how adults react to my child when they talk about where they traveled?
Yeah.
Stop that shit. Stop making a big deal of the fact that some kid went to Rio de Janeiro, because then what you're saying is you're over-indexing on how important that is. But if my kid went to Reno or Rhode Island, if you regulate that, now if you're from Brazil, it's one thing. Oh, I'm from there. That's different. If it's like, that's a long way to go and it's expensive, right? If that's what makes you be like, oh, you're going to be so worldly and you're going to learn all these languages. And now all of a sudden, well, so if I go to a place like Rhode Island where I don't learn a new language that has a lower value, well, then as adults, we need to stop that shit and stop like placing these values on these
judgments,
things that are connected to success or money or status, because when you do that, you're creating the subtext. If I'm just wearing a Yale t-shirt because I like it, cool, right? If I'm wearing it because I'm like, oh, I'm so proud, and then people start being like, oh, you went to Yale, and your kids are there, they're like, well, I guess going to the school on my dad's chest has a different perception in the world. Therefore, if I want that perception, and when I go places, I want people to be like excited to talk to me, I guess I should go to a school that when I put it on my chest, people see value in it and react differently than another school. So we got to stop. Man. We as adults can control that in our own circles.
Yo, but I hear you, dude. The level of I think I pride myself on being pretty self-aware. But bro, like the excitement when a kid tells me they went to Rio, I do that. I'm gonna stop doing it now because you pointed it out. This is why we need to have more of these conversations.
I see happening with my kids.
No one's talking about this.
Then I watch my kids literally start leading in with that shit. And you're like, why are you leading in with that? And you're like, because all the adults, every time you say you went somewhere, oh, tell me where you went now, Rio. You know, my kid's name is Rio, one of my oldest. So people will say things like, where'd you go recently? You've probably been on a trip. It's like, oh my God, no. It's just another reason why I don't post anything on Instagram, right? I will not post anything. I'm thinking about posting again, but everything that I post, I'm trying to be very intentional on making sure that nothing can be attached to travel and things like that. because people place such a high value on that, right? That I'm like, nope, I will never post a picture that's like tagged in a certain place where you can tell where I'm at. I want to take pictures on a random Tuesday in my house in Philly with my kids or hanging out, right? So I try really hard to control for that, because even the social shit, parents start asking your kids what they're doing based on what you posted on social. Oh my God, I saw you were in Hong Kong. That's so cool.
Right.
And you're like, well, shit, if I didn't post that on social, I wouldn't. We have more control over how these things end up. We don't have control of how the kids end up, but we do have control of what we put on social media that then other freaking adults will process as high value, and then they bring that to our kids. So then our kids just start to learn, I want attention. We all want attention, right?
Yeah.
So my kids like, I want attention. Do people give me more attention when I talk about going to Hong Kong than when I talk about going to freaking, somewhere in Ohio? Yeah. All right. Well, then I guess we should talk about Hong Kong more. Great. Now I got that kid.
Oh, man.
So,
dude,
because we can't change the systems, right? We can't change the systems. We can't change the world. We can't do all that, but we can control what we put out that other adults will read and then talk to our kids separately without us even being there, right?
Yeah.
We can control what your kids put, and then all of a sudden your kids are going to start putting this shit on social media when they get these phones.
That'll be the next episode.
That would be the next episode. Yeah, I got to catch a flight and I got to leave in 20 minutes.
Oh, man. Dude, Will, I mean, that was the fastest hour and 30 minutes that it's ever gone by. And so you are a gem. I know people are yearning for this type of conversation, and I'm excited that you were excited about it, and then we're gonna do more of this, man. This is the kind of content that needs to exist. Fucking strip away the performative fucking bullshit, and thank you, man. You've given me a lot to think about.
But you get back what you lead with. I'll tell you, like, I've listened to a lot of freaking podcasts. I do a lot of runs in the morning, and the one podcast you dropped where you said, I thought about going back to work for someone, but it would have to be under these. It was something like, it would have to be under these like rules, kind of, because I've done the whole hedge fund thing before, or whatever it was, and like the Wall Street thing, and this, like, do you know how many people are running their own thing that all they hear is, I'd rather work 80 hours for myself than 40 hours for somebody else? Well, that fucking comes at a cost, motherfucker. That's 40 extra fucking hours a week. Do you really want to do that? And do you really want to look at your kid and you're not able to do what you want to do for them because you're living your dream and it's not working out at the level you thought? Like,
oh, man.
And you opened up at that, and there's certain times where you like listen to people and you're like, that's a real motherfucker right there. And like that whole podcast that you did, you should link to it. If anybody's listening to this for the first time, like it's one of those things where you're like, like that is one of those real motherfucker moments where you're like, nobody says shit like that, but we all think it at some point, like, I could just get the job again and then take care of my family differently and this and that and remove some of this stress. So bro, I appreciate you for what you're putting out there, because it's not typical. It's not.
Thank you. That's high praise, man. High fucking praise. Will, where can people go find you?
I don't know. Google me. My name is Will with one L. Google me. You'll find me. Like, but I'm just trying to, I don't know. I think the most important thing is like feel free to hit me up. I think this is a lonely place where a lot of us are trying to figure this stuff out. If you're going to hit me up, tell me what tools do you use to figure out your own shit? I think that is I'm learning more and more that is a skill. Like the ability for you to self-police your own bullshit at even a 25% level is a freaking superpower. But you got to spend so much time trying to really unpack it, that if we can start to share with each other our tools and tricks, they're not really tools and tricks, but it's the methods that we use, the books that we've read, the posts that we've read, where you're like, I read that, stepped away and was like, I got to look at myself differently. We got to keep sharing that. So if you hit me up, share with me those kinds of things, because it'll help me be a better human.
Beautiful, man. Well, thanks so much, Will.
Dude, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me on.